All right, it's time. Let's get this show on the road. I'm feeling it. It's a big week. Let's make it happen.
And we're live. You're listening to the Hashgraph Enthusiasts Show.
Hosted by Brandon Davenport, aka It's Brandon D.
Okay. Here we go. It's Wednesday. It's the Hashgraph Enthusiasts News. I'm digging it. Last show of the year. Last show of 2023. It's so good to share it with everybody live on X Spaces and then everyone listening to the recording and everything like that. We got a lot to talk about today too. We're going to be talking about like just reflecting back on, 2023. A lot's happened. A bit of an interesting narrative out there about other networks experiencing like congestions and issues with fees and kind of how that ties into Hedera. Lots of like rumors and stuff with ETFs. And then as people know, Hedera has like a new president now, Charles. He's had an interesting first week. We'll talk about that. Gaming breadcrumbs, the Hedera token service crypto market. It's like its own little market. It's very interesting. WalletConnect updates. I think a lot of people are excited about WalletConnect. We'll talk about that. And then Masari Crypto published their like 2024 crypto thesis. So that'll be interesting. And then we're just going to look ahead into the next year, kind of what's on people's minds, what's going on, all that good stuff. Should be a good one. And I'm excited too, because with the show, I'm going to be kind of changing a couple things. I usually kind of do the, the script read at the beginning, kind of starting the show. So I think this might be the last time I do this. So before I kind of rework the intro, but one last time. And with that, hello from Ottawa, Canada, everyone. My name's Brandon Davenport, aka It's Brandon D. It is Wednesday, December 20th, and you're listening to episode 106 of the Hashgraph Enthusiasts Show. All roads lead to Hedera. This is a weekly news show where we cover the top 10 stories related to Hedera, HBAR, and everything in between. Listen live on X Spaces every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Also, catch the Hashgraph Enthusiast interview episodes. Had one that really recently with the CEO of Takeon that was really, really fascinating. Dave, very fascinating. I think that was episode 104, I believe. Go listen to it. It's great. It's kind of like the future of file storage for Web3. Get all the info you need about the show at itsbrandond.com/HBAR. And for people listening live right now, check the post pin to the top. It's got the list of the stories we're going to be talking about. Take a moment to share the spaces. And if you got some news people should know about, there's a little button at the bottom right of the spaces, like a little comment button. Click that, leave a comment. Let me know if there's something I should mention on the show. And for everyone listening on podcast platforms, leave a comment, break down your thoughts. Let me know what your thoughts are, what we talk about today. Let's keep the conversation going. Right off the bat, really big shout out to the community. I was on a live spaces last week. It was a community, holiday party hosted by Hello Future Buzz. There was like a charity auction. It was really, really cool. And a lot of cool people were there. I think Christian Hasker was there, Zenobia was there from Hedera, and then a bunch of like really, awesome community members. Good panel. And I was up there, and I really love going to these spaces, and I love to support everybody. And I get up there, and Christian Hasker starts reading a poem. And it turns out I got this award. It's like the HBAR Barbarian of the Year award. I'm being mailed a little like this crystal thing or something. Anyways, it's like this community award thing. It was really meaningful. It was awesome. And so I just wanted to give a shout out to everyone that, put that together. I think a lot of money was raised for good cause. People donated NFTs. So I think that was awesome, but huge shout out to the community. That it was like, I was totally surprised. I had no idea it was happening, and I showed up, and it was like, it was crazy. I posted a clip of it, but, it really meant a lot. Also too, Hedera updated the mainnet to version 0.44. So there's a bunch of updates, right? Mainnet is what everything runs on. So that's important to know. One of the funnest elements of that update was there's new ASCII art that was included, which is kind of like text art. So if you were to, boot up a Hedera node or an AppNet or something like that in your terminal, you'll see some kind of text-based artwork. They updated that. I thought that was funny. Also, too, there's this AI news channel I've been seeing that's purportedly like leveraging Hedera in some way. I don't know if it is. It's hard to determine. There was a post on LinkedIn from someone from the HBAR association, the Hashgraph Association. I think it's one of those things where people are like, hey, this would be a good use case for an AI news network, but it wasn't really, I think the initial impression was that it is using Hedera, but that's not really clear. So it's interesting. I'm looking into it a bit more. It's called like Channel 1 or something. But yeah, initially, just the way people were talking about it, I was like, oh, this is obviously, yeah, perfect use case, being able to tokenize and record, have provenance of, decisions that an AI makes, or certain materials or this and that, because if you're going to have an AI news network, you have to be able to kind of track that, layer of trust and everything like that. But there really isn't anything to kind of say it's using Hedera. So perfect use case, really exciting. Not really clear whether it's using Hedera or not. Also, there was one thing I've been noticing, and I guess maybe what we'll do is we'll talk about this in a bit. It's just, I can't help but mention that a big theme of this episode is just some really exciting things that are happening in the ecosystem on all fronts. Like, you can look at the charts for sure, but I think that just the posture of a lot of key people has changed in a good way. So we're gonna dive into that. Some other kind of random news items was like, there was a big vulnerability with Ledger, the hardware cold wallets, and not with the wallets themselves, but with certain smart contracts. If you were using a certain library, basically a tool set, to sign those transactions, you could be at risk of, losing funds and stuff. I think that the exploit caused I think Ledger was saying it was like $600,000 or something was lost. So, not the end of the world, but a big deal. The clarification was kind of people on Hedera and in general were like, oh, our Ledger is safe. And I know that Ledger has had a few things happen with them that has led a lot of people to kind of say, hey, maybe they're not as secure as we think. I think in general, Ledger, cold wallets are pretty secure. I use one myself. And I think that the exploit was largely smart contract based with particular contracts. So really on Hedera, there really wasn't any risk factor. It's just kind of crazy to see, a hardware wallet have something like that happen to it. But it's exciting because, as some of these hardware wallet companies are having issues, we also have, Citadel wallet in the Hedera ecosystem. It's going to be a new hardware wallet that is designed specifically for Hedera. I think that there's a lot of innovation about to happen in the hardware wallet space. But I think leading up to that, there's going to be quite a bit of, struggle, clearly. Also too, there was a platform called Yearn Finance. They accidentally swapped $2 million of their treasury into $780,000. It was like an accidental swap they did, which was insane. I won't dive into it, but just if you're curious, check it out. You're in finance. What happened with them? It's kind of wild, like just an accidental swap of their entire treasury. El Salvador passes legislation for Bitcoin-backed bonds, just kind of feeding into that narrative of, a lot of, financial institutions and governments really kind of taking Bitcoin more seriously. There's a crypto app, ShakePay. They had a data breach. So just if you're using ShakePay, keep an eye out for that. FTX, still in the headlines, have been for a long time. For those out of the loop, it was an exchange that kind of, a lot of people went to prison. It failed, declared bankruptcy. There's, they're trying to figure it out. So they're filing for a reorganization plan to end the bankruptcy. But at the same time, the IRS is claiming that FTX owes $24 billion in unpaid taxes. So we're going to have to see how that plays out. And also, Coinbase is suing the SEC for denying transparent crypto regulation, alleging arbitrary decision and APA violation. I think a lot of people have been seeing this in the headlines. The SEC and Coinbase, and then, some of the different policy things with Elizabeth Warren and all sorts of stuff like that. And the Coinbase thing is interesting because an APA violation refers to a breach of the Administrative Procedure Act, an APA, a law that governs the process by which federal agencies in the United States develop and issue regulations. In the context of the SEC and Coinbase lawsuit, Coinbase has accused the SEC of violating APA by failing to engage in rulemaking and instead pursuing regulation through enforcement actions. So it's this there's like this common, it feels like a wheel spinning of like, there are no specific rules that should be followed. And the SEC is saying, hey, follow these rules, but they aren't really that well defined. So it's a continuous struggle. But I think Coinbase frames it well. There's 48 million people in the US using crypto. And it's not like we're waiting for, crypto to be used at a big scale or used for important things. It's just kind of already is. And largely some of this resistance in the government is, backed by banks. And so we just have to kind of see how things play out. But it's been really interesting. Another, just kind of flipping over to the Hedera side, something else that was kind of cool was this clip from Mance Harmon. And it was like, I'll try to pipe it in here to the spaces, but Mance tweets out, quote, "This is where it all started. The very first pitch of Hashgraph to anyone before it was called Hashgraph. Lehman and I called it Hashdag, standing for, DAG is direct acrylic graph. Many thanks to, who's this person? Andre, for sending this clip. This is from summer 2015. This is what Mance said.
What I'm looking at. What am I looking at?
What you're looking at is the holy grail of distributed consensus.
Tell me what I'm looking at. What am I looking at?
What you're looking at is...
It's this clip of Mance holding like a Coca-Cola in front of this TV. And he's like, you're looking at the holy grail of consensus. And like looking back, like at that time, if you're with that guy, you'd be like, this guy's nuts. But it's clear. I mean, here we are now. So, I mean, if that's not vision, I don't know what is. Also, too, a quick shout out to developers on Hedera. There's something interesting happening. There is a electric capital developer report, which is an annual analysis showcasing activity with open source Web3 ecosystems. Basically, Hedera has a tweet out. A few other people have a tweet out. There's some details on GitHub, but basically, if you want to be included in that report and kind of be a part of essentially the statistic of how, much development is happening on the network, have your project highlighted, go check it out. I think it's just a little config you have to make to your app, or it's a request, a pull request, you put it on GitHub to get the, their file updated or whatever. Anyways, go check it out. It's important. Electric Capital, Hedera. Our first story, big story. that I want to dive into is just kind of reflecting on 2023. There's been quite a few, projects, funds, organizations in the Hedera ecosystem kind of publishing these retrospectives, these kind of looks back on the year. And there's some really interesting kind of things, especially from this HBAR Foundation article that was published that had some interesting items in it. And I know that the HBAR Foundation has been a topic of discussion because people are very curious kind of what's happened, how was the money spent, what were the results. So let's dive into that first. In the article, I'm just going to read a couple excerpts, kind of pieces that I pulled from it that are interesting. First piece is, quote, "In 2022, one of our most meaningful lessons was that support goes beyond just funding. This year, the importance of post-grant support was paramount." So basically saying you can't just give a project money. You have to, kind of incubate it a little bit. You have to give them expertise, support, whether it be marketing, finance, legal, whatever it is. So seems obvious, but I guess in practice, especially knowing that the foundation started really hitting the ground running and not really being able to get prepared in time. It's about constant iteration, Another thing was, quote, "We remain convinced that our 4 funds, crypto economy, fintech and payments, consumer engagement, and sustainable impact, remain the right focus areas for our work." So, I think it's a good strategy. As we've known, the foundation has kind of changed those funds quite a bit. I mean, I think they started with 6. I can't remember, but they've changed them quite a bit. And it's good to kind of see they've found something that works, a funding structure that works. So the next is, quote, "The consumer engagement strategy is to present the Hedera network as an ecosystem as a service, allowing for brands to find the infrastructure and partners required to capture the new demographic of digital natives now demanding a, quote, owner economy." And this is interesting. Ecosystem as a service. Basically what they're saying is kind of, the Hedera ecosystem, it has wallets, it has DEXs, it has different tooling, it has different supports, it has all these things. And the foundation being able to frame the network as, an ecosystem as a service. If you were to look at, let's say, a startup outside of Web3 or an enterprise or something like that, it's kind of appealing, And I think that ecosystem as a service is something that other networks have, used in the past, kind of that framing. But, I think it works. There's something to be said there too, that to be recognized is a lot of those projects in this kind of ecosystem. I think a lot needs to be said that, this ecosystem has done a whole lot with very little, especially in a bull market. So, it's interesting, it's very interesting. Next, the foundation received 575 leads, around half of what we received last year. This drop in applications was expected given the market conditions across Web3 as a whole. So, and this is important. I mean, the HBAR Foundation is really tasked with and responsible for the growth of the network, right? That's their job. That has been their job, and that's going to be their job in the next year. So knowing that the bear market had an impact like that is important to note. Continuing this year, we committed $16 million in additional funding across 68 grants, down from 195 grants last year. This deliberate reduction was a byproduct of the maturing strategy and the need to focus on nurturing existing grants. Naturally, the ticket sizes for grants came down as well in line with the market. So basically, again, the bear market squeezes everybody, including the foundation. I remember the headline came out when the foundation was given the 10 billion HBAR for their fund, and the headline was basically the HBAR Foundation was the biggest startup fund in the world or in technology with $5 billion. I remember this is when HBAR was at 40, 50 cents. So it must have been really difficult over the last year and a half or so to go from effectively, a $5 billion fund on paper to much, much less than that. So definitely difficult times to navigate. But as we've seen with, the recent price action in HBAR, that narrative may change. Another interesting thing was in 2023 alone, 106 products, services, and use cases went live. However, it's important to note that a large portion of the foundation's funding, namely in areas such as infrastructure and growth initiatives, would fall outside the definition of live mainnet projects. So basically, not all of the work that they've done and the results they've seen are kind of impacting the numbers on the mainnet, which again makes it hard to measure the value of the impact their fund has. But there's a little more on that in a minute. The network grew to over 4 million accounts. Just this year, 2.7 million accounts were created on mainnet. This is a 195% increase compared to last year's account growth. So that's big stuff. I mean, it's important to note that I think a lot of these accounts that were created over this year weren't necessarily active accounts. I think that there's, some projects out there that inflate numbers. And that's just natural. That's what any business does. For example, in the music industry, you'll have people that buy Twitter followers, or if anyone's familiar, you go to the movie theater and you get a cup with a pop artist on it with a QR code to claim an album that goes to a record sale. Or if an artist comes out with a new record, the record company might go to Walmart and buy all the first copies to boost sales. It's like sometimes, when you're starting out, there's a little bit of that. So you do want to keep that in mind. I think there are more meaningful metrics, better proxies to success than just the number of accounts. But on the surface, obviously, really, really good to see that. Just two last things here from the HBAR Foundation article was the ability to track and analyze revenue is one of our most important data strategies. This year, the network generated over $3.5 million in revenue, achieving a 10x year-over-year growth. In fact, 2023 revenue is 5 times that of all previous years combined, while HCS generated 99.7% of transaction volume. It only accounted for 86.4% of network revenue. And that's really the most interesting takeaway. And I think we've spoken about this on the show before, but a lot of people forget that not every transaction on Hedera is equal. And there are other transaction types that generate a lot more revenue. And it's TVL is one metric I think that a lot of people judge a network on. Obviously in Hedera, and again, TVL being total value locked. And a metric I think a lot of people judge Hedera on, especially people in this ecosystem, is transactions per second, right? But I think that what's important to keep in mind is I think that going into this year, one of the most important things to pay attention to is the amount of revenue generated by the network, and knowing that that's increased, 10x year over year. It's pretty amazing. Just even looking at Hedera as a startup, $1 billion unicorn. It's not bad. So this is kind of the biggest thing, the last thing and the biggest thing from the HBAR Foundation report that I think is going to be most important for people to really pay attention to going into the new year that should be coming down the pike is project insight. And again, this is really, really important because the foundation is, again, tasked with growing the network. They're really kind of the tip of the spear when it comes to that. And a big issue that the community's had with the HBAR Foundation is the lack of insight into how decisions are made, where money goes, what's the results of those investments, what are those proxies to understanding success, right? It's really hard to look at the Hedera network and go, okay, we want to see the network grow, right? But there isn't like a mechanism you can measure or track that shows you how much things grow. You need all these different proxies, right? You need things like what are the TPS again, right? What are the revenue? What are the new number of projects? These different types of things. And this information, I think, is if you look hard enough and you spend enough time, you can find some of it. But a lot of it too is things that haven't made it to the main net yet are things that don't offer that public data and information. And so I think that the foundation has said time and time again, that they have this information, but we just don't. But in this article, in this retrospective from the HBAR Foundation, they talk about Project Insight that's coming. So Project Insight, as described, is a comprehensive analytics platform developed by the HBAR Foundation. It focuses on offering detailed, data-driven insights to support decision-making processes. The platform provides in-depth analytics to evaluate the performance and impact of various projects and initiatives. This tool is designed to enhance the effectiveness of the Foundation's efforts by leveraging data for strategic planning and execution. So it appears there's going to be average daily TP. So if you think about, like, if you're familiar with Google Analytics, right, and you look at a dashboard like that, you've got all kinds of different charts and graphs. It's very similar to if you were to use, Metrica, right, when you're looking at the network statistics. This includes a bit more information. So some of the information that will be included in Project Insight is the average daily transactions per second, the number of active grants, revenue generating grants, active users by service, which I think is most important, network revenue by service, transactions by service, accounts and TPS. So a lot of different data surfaced and providing you these different kind of KPIs and proxies to kind of understand exactly what's going on. And I think there's also going to be some filtering functions. So you can filter by, by service or by fund or by date or a specific grantee. So someone who's gotten a grant from the foundation. So actually being able to see, what the performance of these projects are, what revenue they're generating, all these different types of things. Not clear to me how, I'm assuming this is going to be a public data stream or dashboard or app that the community can kind of look at potentially. I don't know if that was mentioned specifically in the article. It wasn't kind of flashing in my face that it would be a public thing. Clearly this is a tool they need internally for some of their, data-driven decision-making. But I hope that, this is a tool that the community can take a look at and dive into. And they shared some KPIs too, some key performance indicators. They mentioned that the network, and they set some targets too. This was very interesting. In August of 2021, the foundation set targets for what they'd expect in 18 months. So August 2021, so that's, a little over a year. So you could say, spring, 2023 or something like that. But it shows kind of where they start, what their goals were, and kind of where we're at. So one thing was they wanted to have they wanted HBAR to be a top 25 token. Obviously right now, we're at 29, I think, or 30. We kind of hover between 33 and like 27 right now. So not quite there. They were also saying average daily TPS would be 750. So in 2023, the average is 980. So that's good. Total transactions, they put it at 5 billion, right? As we all know, we're at about 35 billion. I think we just hit 35 billion today. So clearly, again, overshot that. Good stuff to see. 5 million accounts. We're at 4. So obviously a little short on that. And a few other things, but it's nice to see kind of some of those goals, kind of where we're at. And I think overall, the takeaway from the HBAR Foundation article is two things. Is overall, right, cumulatively, when you just look at growth of the network in 2021 versus now, we're there. Like, we've hit the marks, and like holistically, right? Hedera has grown, I think, at a rate that people have expected. And I think that, the bear market or this or that, I think that Hedera, I don't think has kind of blown minds, but of course there are certain aspects of that growth that kind of fell short, but there are other aspects of that growth that far exceeded expectations, right? Of course, TPS. So I think overall, really good stuff. Now, the other takeaway is, things are just different. Like that's one common thing with this retrospective from the HBAR Foundation is, there's a lot of pivots that have had to happen. There's a lot of changes that have had to happen. And I think that, you have to be able to make those changes. You have to be able to change your mind. You have to be able to, flip pathways. So I think that it's clear that looking backwards, lots of stuff did not end up the way that you thought, for better or for worse. And so that's a lesson moving forward, is we can probably guarantee that going forward, a lot of stuff is not going to happen the way that you think it's going to happen, again, from a network growth perspective. So that was interesting. Also, and again, huge shout out to the HBAR Foundation. I think that it's so important to have that kind of grant giving body be separate from Hedera. I think that overall they've done an awesome job. I think that, rightfully so, as I said, as the tip of the spear for growth of the network, they've come under a lot of criticism, from myself included. But I think that just comes with the territory, right? If you're going to be really at the head of driving that growth, you're going to come up against a lot of headwinds. And what I will say is, kind of seeing this retrospective, I think Elaine Song wrote this article, and kind of seeing how they've digested it and been introspective themselves. It's good to see. I think overall they've done a great job. I think there's a lot of room for improvement, but I don't think it's possible to not have room for improvement. You know what I mean? So huge shout out to the team. And I work with folks from the HBAR Foundation from time to time on different things. And I know people there and stuff, and it's great people. And I don't think, the criticism that they come under is due to like really anybody. It's just the nature of, obviously people are frustrated in a bear market. It's just difficult times. People are spread thin. And I think that really what I've seen is, a foundation that's managed to kind of make it to the other side, not only surviving, right, but actually growing this network beyond expectations. So I think it's enough, right? I think that we can all agree that they've done their job. They've done a decent job. And when you compare that to other areas of Web3, that's pretty amazing. So that's my thoughts on that. Shout out to the HBAR Foundation, folks. Love you guys. Dovu also shared a little bit of a retrospective. I'm not going to go into it too much. I talk about Dovu a lot. Really exciting project. But they shared a cool article. I'll make sure it's linked on itsbrandond.com/HBAR in the show notes and stuff. But they talk about what happened, over the years. So like in January, they collaborated with Hedera at Davos. In February, they integrated with Timeless. In March, they did the Paris Blockchain Week. In April, they did product launches. They set standards. In May and June, they launched their Black Hole project. So basically, a way to kind of like, throw assets on the Hedera network and kind of effectively burn them through a smart contract. Very fascinating stuff. July, they had some partnerships. August, they migrated their token, if people remember that. A couple months ago, the Dove token changed to the Dovu token. And the Dove token obviously was an ERC20 token. And the Dovu token now is, straight through HTS native Hedera token. So, and that was huge, right? That was a really, really, really big change for that project. It's so difficult to do a token migration like that. I think that is something that, if I were to be asked, what are my, top 10, stories from 2023, the Dovu token migration would be there, just because it was like community led. Right. It wasn't something they decided to do. It was a vote they put out. People voted on the DAO platform and then they executed it. and it was very creative in how they did it from a technical standpoint. There's a lot to explore with it. I'd encourage anybody, if you're curious from a technical standpoint or just from a community governance standpoint, how to kind of run a project. That's something to kind of look at like as a case study. So check that out. September, they published a bunch of different things. October, they enhanced their marketplace. They really folded in some more AI stuff. November, December, they really kind of set forward what their product roadmap looks like. And effectively, it's this Dovu OS stuff. It's basically, we talk about the Guardian a lot, right? And the Guardian ecosystem on Hedera a lot, right? The Guardian is this kind of tech stack, this collection of workflows and standards that was highlighted at COP28. But the Guardian is really kind of the gold standard in how you can tokenize carbon offset credits. And as we've talked about on the show, and as we know, carbon offsets as they exist right now in the real world are, garbage. They're low quality, and there isn't enough high quality credits for companies to purchase that need to purchase those. And the reason they're low quality is because the markets are opaque, right? Which means you can't see inside them. And the ways in which they're tracked and verified also aren't done in a way that's transparent and immutable. So using something like Hedera and building something like Guardian creates this whole new ecosystem to do those things. So that way, large enterprises will finally be able to purchase enough of these high quality credits that they need. And also the other side of it, the supply side, is it's so difficult and expensive and lengthy for a lot of ecosystem, like ecological projects, carbon sequestering projects, to issue credits, right? To create credits for their project. It's too difficult. So the Guardian is an incredible piece of technology that will be the engine in which a lot of this, multi-trillion-dollar carbon offset market leverages on Hedera. But the issue is it's still very difficult for a lot of these, again, ecological projects to use. So Dovu is basically kind of the layer on top of that that's going to allow the supply side and the demand side to be easier to use effectively. And the Dovu token will be used to pay for those services. And effectively, a way you can think of it is in the computer world, you've got Unix, right? And Unix was a computer platform that is used still, globally to make computers do the things that you need them to do. But an operating system like Mac OS X is built on top of Unix that allows you as a user to do things easier, right? And faster. So you can in my mind, I kind of think of the Guardian as Unix and Dovu as kind of Mac OS X, right? Or, another funnier analogy that I was throwing around was the Guardian is kind of like, if we're in a world where there's a huge demand for apple pie, the Guardian is kind of like all the raw ingredients for an apple pie. And then Dovu is kind of like an apple pie cooling in the windowsill. So you can't have Dovu without the Guardian, but Dovu, I think, is that next layer, and I think is going to be an accelerant for this carbon offset ecosystem. So if you get a chance, go check out that article from Dovu, kind of like, looking back. And something else that's interesting was just one last thing on this kind of look back and, into 2023. There was a post on the Hedera subreddit that was, I'll just kind of read it verbatim because it kind of puts things into perspective a little bit. But the title of this post was, quote, "Just so you know, use cases developed on Hedera are at a scale never seen before. Let's take a moment to make some remarks. Visa Net handles 1,500 to 2,000 transactions per second, though it can scale way over that and supports up to 24,000 transactions per second if needed. During the regular 6.5 hours of the New York Stock Exchange session, there are 38.3 million contracts going through the network, which is roughly about 16 to 1,700 transactions per second. Carte Bleue, France's debit card system, averages 500 transactions per second. Swift processes 580 transactions per second. Now comes Atma's 3,000 transactions per second on Hedera. What Atma is building is nowhere near the valuation of these traditional use cases, yet it seems like Avery Dennison bets it is worth it. Coupon Bureau, EDF, FIS, Bank Social, The Guardian seem to think the same way. The conclusion is simple. DLTs have lower cost to barrier of transactions to a point where it's possible to build use cases that are way bigger than actual infrastructures. Regular transaction use cases have in common, regular transactions use cases have in common that they process transactions that bear way bigger value than Atma.io's ones. So basically what they're saying is, with that same horsepower, with Atma.io's 3,000 transactions per second, those don't really carry a massive payload. But if you think about Visa Network, or you think about Swift, or you think about the New York Stock Exchange, the value of each of those transactions might be massive. DLT could bring a transaction value in the same scope as an email is now worth. There are over 350 billion emails sent every day, which translates to 4 million every second. This is something the rest of the crypto space, focused on DeFi and traditional finance, doesn't fully understand. And this is why Hedera has a chance to shine among all value propositions out there. And that's a great point. It's a great way of looking at it. I think that it was fascinating. At the beginning of this year, when Hedera was at 9 transactions per second, you would look at some of these use cases, for example, like France's debit card system or Swift that processes 500 transactions per second, and you would be like, wow, imagine if that went live on the Hedera network. But out of left field, out of nowhere, we got a supply chain use case from Avery Dennison, right? Atma.io, that's at 3,000 transactions per second. So it's very interesting. I appreciated that post because it kind of put things into perspective a little bit. Not only is Atma.io, arguably the largest use case on Web3, period. It's bigger when it comes to transactions than the Visa network or the New York Stock Exchange potentially combined. So it's really, really fascinating stuff. And you think about the amount of money it takes for Atma to run their use case, right? It takes Atma.io, what is it? It's like, $10,000 a day or a month or something like that. Imagine how much more expensive it would be for them to do it another way. There's a real case to be made that the Hedera consensus service is more cost effective than a traditional database. Really, really fascinating stuff. And then just, before moving on, like just looking back on the year, just on the show, we did 100 episodes. This is episode 106. We're going to be at episode 200 next November, which is crazy to think about. We'll get there. And this year too, like we enabled for the show, contributions. So I'm talking to you right now on a new setup of like professional, podcast broadcasting equipment purchased by the show. Listeners of the show donated enough HBAR to purchase a bunch of equipment. So that was crazy. And that only took, a small part of the last year. We upgraded formats. So if you go, for example, if you were to go back and listen to, episode, 55 or something like that, the show feels completely different now. I continually try to refine the format of the show, make it, better to listen to. Also too, leveling up the way that research is done. A lot of work has been done in that regard, especially leveraging AI and stuff like that. I want to be able to make sure I can pack in as much information, accurate information as possible. And this year too, like the show went live on all sorts of podcast platforms. So like YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all that type of stuff. That's been really exciting to see. And, I think that, the growth of the Hedera ecosystem has been exciting to see. And yeah, just excited for the show. It's blown my mind at how much the show's grown over this year. And that was in a bear market, right? So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens into the new year. Also, just a quick note on that, while we're talking about the show, before we dive into a bunch of other stuff, the Hashgraph Enthusiasts Show averages about 500 listeners every week on X Spaces and hundreds more on podcast platforms. And over the years, I've covered every major Hedera news event, unpacked almost every juicy rumor, and hosted countless in-depth discussions with important figures in the Hedera ecosystem. And I've been able to broadcast all of it live with you guys. So if you'd like to support the show, consider making an HBAR contribution, like many folks in the community have been doing. Even a few bucks add up. You can send a contribution to enthusiast.hbar using your Hedera wallet. Fun memos are appreciated. And the show's full Hedera address is in the podcast show notes, YouTube description, all that kind of good stuff. It's up at the top too in the Jumbotron. There's a Hedera address if you want to support the show. A free way to support as well. Leave a, rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Google, and subscribe on YouTube and tickle the algorithm. It helps. I also accept tips on Galaxy as well. That's been really cool. Let's talk about, I think, probably something that's on top of everyone's mind. And I think that something we've seen in the ecosystem start to blow up a little bit. And this concerns congestion, fees, and frustration. This is a kind of, a story that tackles kind of two sides of this. There's a bummer side and then there's a positive side. The bummer side of it is that there's a lot of Web3 networks out there that have a lot of cool things happening on them. And they're just kind of, they're having some problems with scaling. And they're solving problems. They're providing solutions to problems that maybe don't need to be solved. Right. And one of those off the top is regarding MEV attacks, right? Maximum extractable value, or minor extractable value. And that basically is people front running trades and all these different types of things. And I've seen updates from like Uniswap and different DEXs and other networks that they have these new features and mechanisms to help combat that. But you look at Hedera and, minimum extractable value attacks like don't happen on the network because how the network is architected with the about gossip protocol, virtual voting, etc. The way that transactions come to consensus, you don't have a mempool. You don't have a risk of MEV. It just doesn't exist on Hedera. Saucer Swap put out a post recently about this. And it's fascinating. Saucer Swap says, and this is again in response to Uniswap Labs that says, say goodbye to front running and sandwich attacks. Uniswap X returns surplus generated by MEV back to swappers via price improvements. So again, it's kind of like a solution to a problem that just shouldn't exist. Saucer Swap boldly reposts this and says, quote, the issues of MEV, maximal extractable value, and front running are prevalent across many blockchains. However, these problems simply do not exist on the Hedera network. Hedera's unique Hashgraph consensus algorithm, operating without a mempool and bypassing the conventional block structure vulnerable to bribes and toxic order flow, ensures fair transaction ordering. So it's pretty wild. And continuing, I think that even more so, there's been a big increase in fees on networks like Ethereum, Avalanche, Cardano, Solana. We've kind of seen these on Twitter. One that stuck out to me that I shared was, on X, someone that posted LMFAO, and there was a transaction somebody was trying to do on the Avalanche network, and the fee was $434. Max fee was $586. And that's just wild. And again, this was a network that really, touted low transaction fees. And, same with Ethereum, right? We're seeing some fee spike on there. Solana, similar. Cardano. On Cardano, we're actually seeing that it can take 10 to 15 minutes for a Cardano transaction to appear on the network. And consistently, I'm seeing kind of fees on these networks at like $60 or like hundreds of dollars, and it's wild. And a lot of these transactions, like not a lot, but like some of them will fail. So you'll spend $200 for a transaction, and it just won't go through. And it's kind of crazy to see that. And I think that the issue is increased network activity. As the network is used more, the fees increase. It's like a little built-in mechanism to prevent, network congestion. And it's very interesting because on the flip side, Hedera's fee structure is completely different, and we haven't seen any increase in fees on Hedera, despite Hedera, being used more than these other networks. Now, again, those are Hedera consensus service transactions. But when we look at, smart contract transactions or different things like that, it's about the same as these other networks. And the real lesson here right now is that for sure, low fees are important, right? But more important is what we're learning is fixed fees are important. And it's a really weird thing to talk about because network fees fixed in US dollar for a crypto network is like a very foreign concept. It's not something that these other networks are able to do, right? And so you see layer twos and all sorts of different side chains and different things crop up to fill gaps. And I think that you wonder what the bull market is going to look like as these networks start to be used more and more. And the frustration grows on X and different social media that you see about people saying, listen, I had 3 transactions fail and they cost me, $200. Like it really kind of, that's the downside to it is, we can look at it one way and go, oh, well, that doesn't happen on Hedera. Hedera is so much better. This is good for Hedera. But there's another side to it too that's like, well, I mean, as we know, not enough people know about Hedera, and it's not helpful if the narrative or if the takeaway of these networks is that they don't work properly. Hedera will just be clumped into that. And it'll elongate the amount of time that, discovery happens for Hedera. It's just not good. So it's a bummer to see those things. It is what it is. And yeah, I mean, it makes you go, well, geez, Hedera is so well positioned. It's only a matter of time. But I look at it and I'm like, as someone in the Web3 space using crypto, and I scroll through X and I'm like, someone lost like $300 on failed transactions. I'm like, Jesus, that sucks. It sucks. And you kind of think about what's that person going to do? Is that person going to go, oh, well, I'm going to look for a better network? Or are they going to go, I'm just going to quit crypto. This is stupid. Right now there's probably a higher likelihood they're just going to, sign off for a bit, which is unfortunate. And I think the key thing here too is like, you'll have a network where the fees will increase by like 2,000%. But, the argument will be, well, they're still, tiny. They're still under a cent. And I don't think that the crypto space kind of has kind of been able to reframe what a crypto network means yet. When you think about that, you go, put yourself in the shoes of an enterprise that uses, let's say, a web host like Amazon. Imagine if, and again, even if those transactions are very, very, very tiny, they're doing a lot of them. And so imagine if if Amazon called you up and was like, hey, we're increasing the cost of our network by 2,000%. You'd be like, oh my God, we have to find another network host. This is crazy. It just doesn't happen, right? Credit card processors, don't jack up their fees when the network is being used a lot. It scales. Yeah, business just can't operate with that kind of stuff. And yes, the fees on some networks are still very low, right? They're still very affordable. But again, it's the ability to forecast what the costs are going to be, the fixed nature of fees. Mance Harmon, founder of Hedera, put out a post, and it was really fascinating because, this guy doesn't post on social media a lot, but recently he's been posting, and one of the things he said was on this, really coming out in front of this and saying like, hey, there's been problems in, Web3 with these types of things. And, he said that it's very important that a network's, the transaction cost for a network should be unrelated to the price of that network's token. So basically saying, the price of a network's token going up or down should not have an effect on how much it costs to use the network. And it's a roundabout way of saying, fees should be fixed, which they are on Hedera. So that's been really, really fascinating. And so it's like when we look at this, what we're starting to see is people kind of going to the next network. So people are complaining on social media about these high fees. So a lot of people right now are looking at Solana, and Solana is managing to keep up with things as it stands right now, albeit, fees are fluctuating in a way that might deter an enterprise. For the average user, it's not a huge deterrent. Like if you're paying for a swap and your fees go from, 1 cent to 20 cents, it's like, well, it's not that big of a deal. It's still cheap. It's not like we're talking about $1 or hundreds of dollars. It's fantastic in comparison. So we're going to see how things play out, but that's really what I'm seeing a pattern is people are looking to networks that are high visibility, right? They have a large mind share, a large market share, a big user base, and low fees. And right now, Hedera has those low fees, but it doesn't have that kind of massive footprint in Web3 yet. But it's that fixed fee component that's going to be the real sticking point. And, I think you look even at Bitcoin too. Bitcoin continues to have this risk of like forking the network because of these BRC20 tokens and ordinals, right? The desire to have other fungible tokens besides Bitcoin on the Bitcoin network and have NFTs on the Bitcoin network. It's causing, hundreds of thousands of transactions to get, backed up. It's causing, the mempool to grow to like over a gigabyte in size. So a lot of these Bitcoin maintainers and originalists are kind of like, you can't have this stuff happening on the Bitcoin network. We can't be doing ordinals and BRC20 tokens. So there's also this struggle on the Bitcoin side, for a non-EVM network. And so that's also difficult to watch too. There's a lot of, with a bull market, there comes a lot of pressure. There comes a lot of conflict. There comes a lot of, painful growth. And the product of that is kind of seeing what's unfolding right now. So it's interesting. It's interesting to watch. But in the big scheme of things, what are some takeaways for us kind of in the Hedera ecosystem with everything going on? And what it really boils down to is, these pain points need to be experienced before people look for solutions, right? You can't, no matter how much you explain things for people or how much you spell it out to them, people are not going to use an alternative until they feel the pain, right? And that's what we're starting to see is people are starting to feel the pain on these networks. Speaking for myself, doing a transaction that might cost $100 and having it fail is, a very negative experience and a very discouraging experience. That's a very motivating thing to look for an alternative. Will the alternative be Hedera initially? Probably not. Most likely people will just work their way down the market cap list, right? What's the next biggest network that has low fees? And really what we're betting on is, as people do that, I think that those other networks may experience similar issues, right? We saw it last year with Solana with failed transactions and transaction cost spikes with Ethereum as well, and all these different things. And I think it's a large topic of conversation. It's very nuanced, but at the high level, it's, that's really what it boils down to. And the other aspect to this too, kind of a struggle for Hedera, is the fact that it is really, Hashgraph is a disruptive technology, as we talk about. It's a threat, or can be seen as a threat to these other networks, right? When we look at the issues with, MEV and all these different inefficiencies, those are opportunities for generating profit, right? And when you take those away, when you take those inefficiencies away, of course, it unlocks things like, a lot of, enterprise use cases and mass adoption, all these different things. But it also removes a lot of how the Web industry, the Web3 industry currently generates revenue. So Hashgraph is a very disruptive technology. So that's a headwind that kind of works against it a little bit. And I think will ultimately cause hesitation just because it can be seen as a threat by many. Even if you, for example, were to look outside of crypto and Web3, if you were to look at, again, like the New York Stock Exchange or the DTCC, you look at that and you go, well, there's inefficiencies right there that Hedera solves. And maybe is that a reason why we don't see more adoption of Hedera and Hashgraph immediately in some of those other areas? Is it just technical issues to work through, or is there actual kind of resistance because it's a disruptive technology? And then some other points here are like, it's really critical that as many people as possible have positive experiences using Hedera that can contrast their experience on other networks. And I think we look at different projects like what Saucer Swap has been doing with that awareness. And that's, I think, another major hurdle for this network is what do people want to do, right? The people that we see complaining about these high fees on other networks, these failed transactions on other networks, these inconsistencies and inefficiencies on other networks, what are the things that they're trying to do, right? What are the problems that we have to solve for them? And largely these people are retail users that are trying to do lending and DeFi and NFTs and all these different types of things. And on Hedera, there's still a few gaps to fill, right? We don't have, lending, right? We don't have a retail oracle. There are some things we don't have yet that could be a blocker to this, right? And could have retail kind of saying, for sure, this is a network that solves a lot of problems, but I need to be able to do certain things on the network that just might not be available yet. So it's also important to remember that the technology is great for sure and much better and solves a lot of these problems. But what it really comes down to is what do these people want to do, right? What are they trying to do that they're struggling with, and can they do those things on Hedera? And some of those things they just can't do yet. So that's something to keep in mind. Just to wrap up thoughts on this is kind of like, it's also worth remembering that the last bull run that we experienced with Hedera, with HBAR going up to $50, there was no DeFi, there was no NFTs, there was no meme coins, there was no real, retail infrastructure. There was nothing, and we still experienced, an all-time high. So that's the other side to it, is now we have a lot more. So I think that will serve us well, in an upcoming bull market. Saucer Swap also did another post that I just wanted to read again. Shout out to Saucer Swap. Saucer Swap is really important for the network right now because, as I said, something that a lot of these people are trying to do is decentralized finance, right? And Saucer Swap is really a great offering on the Hedera network for decentralized finance. And it's nice to see Saucer Swap come out in front of this. And and this kind of, really highlights what I'm saying here is, so there's a person that posted on X that said, quote, "I thought Avalanche had low gas fees. I'm dead. People are paying just about the same fee on Ethereum as they are on Avalanche. Solana is just the superior chain." And Saucer Swap reposts this and says, "As market activity increases, it's evident that gas fees linked to network usage can turn away users. With network fees fixed in US dollars and unaffected by usage levels, Hedera stands apart." And so that's really what it comes down to is, it's great to see these use cases kind of hitting those points. I think it's really important to a lot of people. And I just wanted to highlight that. I wanted to hit it hard. Again, this being kind of the last show of 2023 for Hashgraph Enthusiasts. It's something important to keep in mind. Pain points, problems, what's going on with these other networks. And, how can, this ecosystem create an environment that will draw people in? What do we need to do? Some exciting news. We talk a lot on the show about these Bitcoin ETFs, right? These exchange traded funds that are very important. And they're important because big money, right? Family offices, institutions, you could think about potentially, employee, retirement funds and like all these different types of things, unions, lots of big money is looking for exposure to crypto, right? Namely Bitcoin. And the ways that the ways in which they can do that right now are pretty limited, right? And it really boils down to they'd have to, purchase Bitcoin or have someone custody Bitcoin for them. And there's a lot of, fiduciary security considerations to be made there, a lot of barriers to entry. And I think it prevents a lot of big money from getting exposure to Bitcoin. So an exchange traded fund that are very popular and they come in all different shapes and sizes. A Bitcoin exchange traded fund, a Bitcoin ETF, would essentially allow someone to go to a stock market and purchase Bitcoin effectively, as simply as purchasing a stock. It would basically be the exact same as purchasing a stock. And to get that into the market, there's been a lot of hurdles and a lot of things that have had to happen. And there's been a lot of blocks. And the main blocker to this has been the SEC, the Security and Exchange Commission. And again, they're very confusing stances on what is a commodity, what is a security, what is allowed, what isn't allowed, what are the regulations, this and that. We just talked kind of at the beginning of the show about Coinbase suing the SEC recently. And it's been all very confusing. And so this year, we've talked quite a bit about what are the developments of these ETFs, and some of the stories we've talked about have shown an overall trend of progress. And it's looking highly likely that in January, we will see some of these Bitcoin exchange traded funds become available on stock exchanges, on these markets. And it will cause an inflow of liquidity and wealth into the crypto industry. And it's going to be a new level of legitimization for cryptocurrency, for Web3 to the masses, because it'll now become a thing they can reach out and touch. They're not going to have to get a crypto wallet. They're not going to have to purchase something that will, a third party will need to custody. It'll be much, much easier. And a few things have kind of developed over this week, which was, number one, the SEC to consider Ethereum as a commodity rather than a security due to the SEC's recent approval of Ethereum futures exchange traded funds. And this was according to Bloomberg. So the stance of these regulatory bodies are starting to kind of change a little bit. Although for sure there's a lot of resistance, we are seeing some kind of positive traction. And I think it comes down to what Coinbase was saying, 48 million, people in America are using crypto. So it's just massive right now. And there's a huge demand for it. There's a lot of money to be made. ARK Invest and 21 Shares, their spot Bitcoin ETFs, have officially been listed in the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation, featuring the ticker ARCB. And there's some other news we'll talk about the DTCC, but that's exciting. And that's another big note, is it's not just one Bitcoin ETF that's going to be listed in these markets. It's a bunch. And it's highly likely that when one gets approved, it won't just be one, right? It'll be a bunch. And there was a recent SEC meeting either today or yesterday between BlackRock, NASDAQ, and the SEC. And it was regarding these Bitcoin ETFs. And BlackRock has been probably at the forefront of this conversation with their ETF proposal. And we talked about, the recent updates to Google's advertising policies for these types of things. Seeing Google update their advertising policies for advertising, these types of financial products is encouraging. It shows that Google is anticipating, a lot more advertising to happen around this. And I'll play something for everybody. This was probably one of the most exciting pieces of news out of this was Bitwise, a company in the space that is going to be offering a Bitcoin ETF. Bitwise is running an ad, and this is an ad featuring if people remember the Dos Equis commercials with the most interesting man in the world. He's back, and this is the ad that they got going on right now.
You know what's interesting these days? Bitcoin. Look for Bitwise, my friends.
And basically it's like, the headline here is like, Bitwise, Bitcoin ETFs backed by a crypto specialist. Like, this is an ad that people will see on television, and and they'll be excited about this. This might be the first time that they purchase Bitcoin when they're, and so it's these types of things that are all kind of coming together and leading to these kind of conclusions of, oh, okay, a lot of stuff is going to be changing. And you can look into it all sorts of different ways. We've talked about it quite a bit on the show, but those are the recent updates when it comes to the Bitcoin ETF stuff. And it's so important for us to keep that in mind in the, Hedera ecosystem, in the Hedera community, because with, a governing council of various enterprises and kind of that, enterprise, angle, this really fits in well with the narrative for Hedera. And if you have this liquidity pouring into the ecosystem, the types of people that would be purchasing, a Bitcoin ETF are probably the types of people that might be curious about something like Hedera. And it'll also be really interesting to see how Hedera leverages the narrative around these ETF listings. And I also, see, people, joke about like, what about an HBAR ETF or something like that? And it's like, I think that could totally happen in years to come. But that's, again, why this is so important that this, we break the ice on this. Next story is just a quick one, but an important one, is the first week of Hedera's new president, Charles Atkins. And, we talked about this news last week. Very, very important. And Charles is, of course, the new president of Hedera. We kind of knew it was coming over the last few months. It was, highlighted in the meeting minutes, and, his background, in finance, in marketing, in Web3, has been, I think received really well. And this first week, right, he was announced last week around this time. So it's really, week one. And one thing that I've noticed is, his, social media feed is full of Hedera stuff right now. And I think that a lot of change is happening in how Hedera kind of presents itself, and some of the top people at Hedera. We talked about some of the tweets from Mance and from Lehman and from other people at Hedera, really kind of coming out in front of some of these narratives, really being bold. And to be frank, to me, it kind of feels like Charles, as the president at Hedera, is coming in hot and kind of being like, hey guys, listen, let's get a little snappy here. Like there's a new way of thinking about these things. There's a new way of, looking at how we present our network. There's a fascinating way of looking at this and a different way of talking about it. And also too, he's going to be at Davos in January. And some of the posts that I've seen is, encouraging. Like, he shared kind of like a meme that was, there's a picture of an old telephone and a Ford Model T. And it's like, hooking up and getting around hasn't always been easy. Of course, I'm talking about advancements of technology. Get your mind out of the gutter. And it's like, it's a little bit like dad joke type thing, but it's good to see, a representative of, Hedera, like actually doing something on social media and actually engaging, right? Which means like, replying to people's tweets, doing things like that. I know it sounds stupid, but those things are actually really important to have a figurehead at the organization like that is engaged. And in my own experience, I posted last week to X and I was like, hey, I'd love to have Charles on the show. What does everyone think? And he kind of responded in like 10 minutes and he's like, hey, I'm super busy, but it would be great. And so I've been hoping that, we had a little bit of that high level, low level connection. I talk about this a lot, this concept of, the Hedera ecosystem kind of feeling like two separate worlds. One is kind of, the enterprise organization, foundation, association, governing council world. And the other is the kind of community, degen, retail, NFT, developer world. And they're kind of feel a little bit separate. And there's always been, I think that a lot of criticisms and struggles have kind of been a product of that like distance between the two. And the goal is to kind of move things a little closer together. And so Charles feels like a figurehead that can kind of do that task a little bit. And I feel like he's reaching across that gap to the other side. And something he said on an interview on the Gossip About Gossip podcast with Zenobia at Hedera was, really kind of hitting the nail on the head. He said, we've got a top down and a bottom up approach. The top down approach is, enterprise and, high level organizations utilizing the network. And then the bottom up approach is, the retail community, the NFT communities, the DeFi communities, the builders, the startups from the bottom up. And if we can work our way to the middle, mass adoption happens in the middle. And so I think that for a long time, the, Hedera as an organization has had a kind of myopic view of really top down only. They really kind of have, their actions have kind of expressed a outlook that all success will emanate from enterprise adoption, when in reality, that's not true. And I think having somebody that understands that is really good. And I think Charles understands that you need both. You really do. And there's a lot of opportunity. And so I think that what we're seeing from, Mance's Twitter account and Lehman's Twitter account and Charles' Twitter account and a lot of these other people that feel so different in recent days is really kind of, Charles going like, hey guys, there's opportunity here. Like if you load up, X and kind of scroll through, you'll see, people on other networks kind of having problems that, we solve. And we should, maybe talk about that. We don't need to talk about HBAR. We don't need to talk about things that we can't talk about, but we can join the conversation. And just to be blunt, a lot of people are a big fan of, the tweet that Mance put out yesterday in regards to, the high fees and different stuff like that. It's like, I suspect that tweet wouldn't have gone out if Charles wasn't president at Hedera. to me, it kind of feels like Mance has given his login to Charles, and Charles is tweeting from Mance's account. That's literally what it feels like. But we'll have to see. But I'm just observing a very sharp change in how the key individuals at Hedera are acting, right, over the last couple days. It's very obvious. Even some of the things Christian Hasker is retweeting, it's very bold. It's very, I don't want to say out of character, but to me, it does feel like someone has kind of said, hey guys, like we have to kind of let some stuff go. We have to kind of like loosen up a little bit here. That's just my observation. And it's my observation because he's been there a week, and there, especially over the last couple of days, there's been a lot of stuff that has changed in how these folks present themselves. And I think it's a good thing. I think it's something the community has been asking for. So more of that, please. And this brings us into our next item. I just want to take a sip of my beverage here. I keep forgetting I have those sounds. I have them to give myself a little bit of a moment, a little bit of a reset. Been talking about a lot of dense stuff. I want to lighten it up a little bit. Hedera is in beast mode, guys. Straight up. I'm not going to lie. I'm pumped up. I mean, I'm looking at the charts. We've got all sorts of green everywhere. Numbers are crazy. I want to go through some numbers, but I mean, I'm like, as I've said on the show, we talk about substance and hype, right? And again, putting it plainly, Hedera, Swirlds, the foundation, the association, they've got this substance stuff covered. Clearly, they do it better than anyone in the industry, period. The hype stuff, that's the community's job. And I think that, it's difficult for me to see someone on, X post something like, for example, here's why I think Hedera is going to go to $2, or that HBAR is going to go to $2. And literally, like, the first comment is like, let's get to 10 cents first and then talk. And it's like, oh, come on. Like, just like, if you look at these other networks and want them to come over here, they got to come over to something fun. They got to come over to a good vibe. I know it sounds dumb, but like, we got to shake that off a little bit. And I say that because if you have other networks making these bold, broad strokes, declarative statements, and they don't have the tech to back it up, and you look at Hedera, and Hedera has the tech to back it up, like, Hedera is the only ecosystem and only network that should be making, big, bold, declarative statements, and it's just, I think that it's time to just really embrace that hype, There's no other way to put it. 1 million new Hedera NFTs were minted in the last 60 hours, which is crazy. 250 million transactions in 24 hours. Nuts. Averaging 3,000 transactions per second. Bonkers. 3 seconds average, or just over 3 seconds average to finality, right? Meaning that a transaction being finished, recorded on the main net, with 100% ABFT finality, 3 seconds. Insanity. 10x revenue growth year over year. Super important. Total value locked at all-time high. The fees remain low and fixed, right? That's the key thing we're talking about here, is like, this network is growing like crazy and the usage of it is expanding like wild, and the fees haven't gone up. That's really important. Big partnerships, right? I mean, we can rattle them off, but I mean, we've talked about them on all the different episodes, but it's just safe to say, like, there's been so many major headlines and big partnerships and all sorts of different things happening in the ecosystem. And the technical analysis I'm seeing on HBAR, I'm seeing a lot of people that do technical analysis on HBAR. I think that Credible Crypto is going to be publishing a video later today or tomorrow or something. But really, like, when you zoom out on HBAR, the asset, it's at this critical moment here, this kind of golden cross where some of these moving averages, some of these different indicators like the MACD are showing a little bit, or not a little bit, but like kind of like a major inflection point that we're in that is causing a lot of people to say, oh, is HBAR going to go parabolic, or is there going to be some kind of like crazy correction, or are we going to keep, consolidating and building? And so there, despite what you think will happen with HBAR, the attention on the asset itself from a technical analysis standpoint is increasing. Eyeballs are growing on HBAR. We're going to, we are starting to see, and we will hopefully continue to see increased volume in the asset. So there's so many different things when you just look at the different numbers and kind of what's been happening. And even other things that were shared, like developer activity, the amount of, I think Hedera is number 2 when it comes to developer activity on L1s. It's crazy. It's the definition of, an undervalued asset, in my opinion. And I think that it's just very interesting where we're at, where we have a situation that value on the network is growing at an exponential rate, and the price remains under 10 cents, right? Is relatively, is not experiencing a massive amount of volatility. That's consolidation, right? That's, exciting opportunity. It's very interesting. And there's no two ways around it. You have to really just kind of call a spade a spade. And I think that that's what a lot of people are feeling, what a lot of people are noticing. And that's what I'm seeing in social media as I scroll through, is a lot of additional eyeballs on Hedera as an asset. And it's very interesting to see that. And I say it's in beast mode because, it does feel like all cylinders are firing. Now, it is, it's important to mention that there definitely are other networks from a price standpoint that are experiencing, a very intense ride up, right? A very large appreciation. And I think that it's, when it comes down to it, people are drawn to big green candles, right? That's just what it comes down to. And we're also, as we said, we're seeing a lot of different pain points being experienced. We're seeing fees go up. We're seeing failed transactions. So it's a very interesting time right now to be in the Hedera ecosystem. There's a lot of, there maybe is a lot of confusion. There's a lot of overwhelm. There's a lot of new people. There's a lot of conflicting ideas. There's a lot of challenges, but that just kind of, to me, is like just an energy that we just haven't had right in this bear market that I don't think a lot of networks have had in this bear market. So that's what it really boils down to me, is there's a lot of energy and it's growing. And like any asset, it's like you can't really predict what's going to happen with it. But the one thing that we can observe is just on all fronts, right? When it comes to price, when it comes to activity on the network, the fundamentals, and partnerships and different things, there's just a lot of energy. And as that energy grows, it's just going to build, right? There's nowhere for it to go. And it's going to be very exciting to see what the product of that is. So this brings us kind of into another area, which is like these breadcrumbs when it comes to gaming on Hedera. And gaming on Hedera has been really interesting. It's been shared many times by many analysts, especially over the last year or two, that, the growth of gaming in crypto in certain ways has exceeded the growth of things like DeFi. Like gaming is definitely a very exciting vertical for Web3. And we've seen a lot of major games, incorporating crypto. There are rumors that, Grand Theft Auto 6 is going to incorporate crypto in some way. So there are many exciting things happening, but from a strictly Hedera purview, right? We've seen a lot of different gaming use cases go live. And you could argue too, like when you look at Karate Combat, that had their 43rd Karate Combat, event in Las Vegas on Friday and stuff. And it's, you could argue that's gaming as well, betting on fights and different things like that. So there's a lot of exciting things happening. And we're going to go back to something we kind of mentioned on the show just a minute ago, which was these million NFTs that were minted over 60 hours. And we're kind of trying to figure out what that is. And some of the conversations that I've been in point to a potential use case involving the Doctor Who intellectual property. Now, we don't know for sure if that's what it is, but there is kind of this, online, digital, kind of like card trading, collectible game type thing. So you could imagine, a million, of those items, right, of those cards, would be enough for a sizable user base. And the other thing too is an update shared from Zepsi, and I'll just read it here. Quote, the most bullish HBAR ecosystem announcement this week that everyone missed. Gaming on Hedera is en route to Valhalla. Spielworks acquires Atomic Hub with the Hashgraph Association, meaning Hedera integration into a top Web3 gaming ecosystem, a top NFT marketplace, a top gaming wallet, first multi-chain wallet, first multi-chain NFT marketplace. So what is that all about? What is Spiel Gaming? Like what's going on there? So Spielworks funding acquisition. So basically Spielworks received strategic funding from the Hashgraph Association and acquired Atomic Hub, which is a leading NFT platform. And they're aiming to develop a Web3 gaming ecosystem globally, leveraging Hedera's public ledger technology. And the Hashgraph Association will assist Spielworks in various areas like business development, technology, and futures funding. And the CEO of Spielworks, Adrian, said, he highlights the partnership's potential to bring high-profile partners and scalable technology. And this emphasizes true ownership of digital assets, right? This kind of quote-unquote owner economy that the HBAR Foundation was talking about, secure token handling, and these reliable blockchain gaming interactions. I think that there's been a lot of games that have tried to integrate Web3, and I think it's just largely fallen flat because of the underlying infrastructure. So it'll be very interesting to see what is going to be the first large scale gaming use case on Hedera. And when I say large scale, I mean kind of what's the AAA game or something like that, So that was a really big kind of story. And there's a press release in the Korea Times, the Korea IT Times, that I'll link at itsbrandond.com/HBAR in the show notes. Definitely go and read it. But yeah, I think that, and then going back to all these NFTs that have been minted on the Hedera network, possibly being linked to a gaming use case, specifically, the Doctor Who intellectual property. It's very, very interesting stuff. And, a million NFTs, that's a lot of NFTs. So we'll just have to see. It's a common theme of you look at the network, you see what's happening. It's clear that, there's stuff happening, but you have to kind of wait to see what it looks like in production. We already talked quite a bit about this, but I just wanted to touch on this next story, just kind of like the Hedera token service crypto market. This is really interesting. I mean, a lot of people have seen today, there's a pump happening on, there's a meme token in the Hedera community ecosystem called Grelf. And it's, super fun. It's a fun project. I dig it. There's a bunch of other coins that are these kind of meme coins and stuff. It grabs eyeballs. It's fun. It's kind of what we talk about, right? When we look at other networks experiencing issues and people complaining and wondering, are these people going to come to Hedera and check these things out? One of the things people like to do is they like to, buy and sell and trade these meme coins. It's a part of Web3 culture, crypto culture. It's something that generates wealth. It's very risky. A lot of people equate it to gambling, but it's just something that a lot of people do. And having these assets, when we talk about marketing the network, one of the most effective ways for a crypto network to market itself is kind of have some of these things, some of these eye-catching, fun, attention-grabbing assets. And it's very interesting to see that unfold. And then also, too, there's all sorts of other tokens, right? Like we talk about Dovu, we talk about, Galaxy, we talk about Saucer Swap, we talk about Head Starter. Like there's so many of these other tokens for different projects and stuff that maybe have a utility or maybe equate to or relate to a startup company or something bringing utility to the network or different things. And so there's also that other side to it, which is kind of like, this little insular market that Hedera has with these tokens. You have to remember how special that is on other networks. All of those kind of other tokens on, let's say, Ethereum or Solana or what have you, they're not tokens that are on the protocol layer, right? They're wrapped inside of these smart contracts. These tokens on Hedera are right on the protocol layer. They act and behave the same as HBAR, and they don't require a smart contract. So it's very interesting. It's a whole new dynamic. And when we talk about experiences that people have on other networks and then experiences they might have on Hedera, you look at that and you go, okay, they go to a DEX on Hedera like Saucer Swap, and they go and perform a swap. It costs them a very small amount of money, right? And it happens in about 8 seconds. And you just think about the impression that might leave on somebody. And, arguably like the dopamine rush. Like you think about going to a DEX on another network and you go to do a swap, it may cost, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, $100, whatever it may be. It could take, 15 minutes, 30 minutes. You have MEV attacks happening. And arguably, for sure, there's a ton of liquidity there. There's a lot of opportunity to make money, but the user experience has challenges, right? And so it's that kind of trade-off. It's that kind of contrast. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens when that key individual or key group goes, you got to try DeFi on Hedera. You won't believe what's going on over here. You got to just try this. And there's a great kind of concept, which is like, it's not very efficient to try and get a million users, right? A great example of this is, people are familiar with Airbnb, and they had a failing strategy initially, which was they were trying to scale the business, right? They were trying to get 100 or, they're trying to get 1 million users of their platform. And that's a really difficult thing to do, especially if you're doing something really new, right? In Airbnb's case, they were renting out properties. And so when they changed their strategy instead to focusing on getting 100 new users that loved their product so much that they would have to tell other people about it, the 1 million users just happens naturally, right? So when we look at the Hedera ecosystem in Web3 and maybe doing certain things that don't scale initially, you really think about that. You go like, okay, so these 100 people that are on social media really frustrated about, these things happening on other networks, these, subpar user experiences. Imagine if, those 100 people, or maybe even 50, or maybe even a dozen people were to just experience a swap on a DEX on Hedera. What impact would that have? Would it be a light bulb moment? Would they go, oh my God, like there's huge opportunity here? That's what's really fascinating to me, right? It's not so much about how do we get 1 million users on Hedera. I think people talk about that a lot. To me, it's kind of like, a dozen or 100 people that like love it and have a fantastic experience. That's just network effects, right? That's just contagious. So I think that one of the great marketing tools that we have for this network right now are, this burgeoning DeFi ecosystem we have, these meme coins that we have, they, like I said, people really get excited about, green candles, prices increasing. There's no way around it. People like to gamble, and it gets exposure for the network, and they will have a positive experience with the network, right? Who cares about how someone arrives on having a positive experience? Once they do, they're going to explore the network more. They're going to learn more about it. You're going to learn more about something that you're excited about versus being told about why it's better than the network you're currently on. So I'm very excited about that. And I know that, people on the Hedera subreddit and a lot of people in the Hedera community, either don't understand or appreciate meme coins or some of these different, call them like degen activities that happen. But, I get that this is an enterprise network, and I understand that, enterprise is definitely going to drive mass adoption. But the reality is that as HBAR gets listed on more exchanges, as the price of HBAR goes up, as the amount of users using the network increases, it helps enterprises. It helps the governing council. And I think that it's just something to really keep in mind. And it's like, even if you don't understand it or don't participate in it, like it would definitely be to a detriment of the ecosystem's growth to shoot down meme coins on Hedera like they're going to damage the network somehow. It's not true. And we need stuff like that, and myself, it's like, I'm not a huge gambler. I don't, participate as a kind of like a full degen with this kind of stuff. It's not, it doesn't fit within my risk profile sometimes, but you just can't be a party pooper, right? Especially going into bull market. You just can't be that way. It's just not going to attract new users. We are in Web3, right? We are in the crypto industry. Like, these things are not the exception. They're just the given, right? It's just what happens. So you got to embrace it. It's hype. Yeah. And I want to talk about another story. I'm just going to take another sip of my bevy here. I think a lot of people have seen the news recently. WalletConnect is coming to the network in a big way. I just want to share a few thoughts on it. And I mean, disclaimer, I'm working with Hgraph on the initiative for, the community engagement side of things, helping wallets come together on these things. And, kind of helping push this initiative forward. It's been a lot of work. But I just wanted to, I think a lot of people had a lot of questions. A lot of people have been asking me about it. On the show, I try not to, talk about things that I'm a part of. I don't want it to come across as though I'm trying to draw attention to projects I'm working on or whatever. But just because people have been asking a lot about it, I just want to share just a few quick thoughts on it. I'd encourage anyone to go out. There's a great article on the Hedera blog, right? Hedera.com/blog. Go and read it. They tweeted it. It has a lot of great info about it. But basically, in the Hedera ecosystem, how wallets function, they all have their own respective integrations. Many of those wallets offer integrations that are open source that, any wallet could use. Many choose to offer their own integrations. And so what it leads to is a bit of fragmentation. And you can see it, right? When you go to connect to a dApp, you get presented with a bunch of different buttons, right? Connect to this wallet, connect to that wallet. And it means that a dApp, right, a decentralized application like a DEX or an NFT marketplace, they have to manage a bunch of different wallet connections, right? A bunch of these different separate pathways for each of these wallets. And the wallets themselves have to kind of, they're required to manage, a good stack of infrastructure. It's a bit of a burden. It can take a dApp, days or a month or so to integrate a new wallet. most of these dApps in the ecosystem will work with one or two wallets. And it's kind of limiting, right? And the reality is that like many things in Web3 or just in the real world, you have to have standards for innovation, for good competition. You have to, competition drives that innovation, but you can't have competition without standards. And so the way things currently are, it's just not an ideal, space for, dApps and wallets to have to kind of manage all this kind of stuff. It's a big burden for those. And then for users, it really limits, what you can do. Like if you use one wallet that doesn't work with different dApps, then it forces difficult decisions. And so what's important also on top of that is it limits the ways in which other wallets on other networks could interface with Hedera dApps, right? Imagine if you were using a Solana wallet and you wanted to use a DEX on Hedera. Well, you'd have to get a Hedera wallet, and it just creates a barrier to entry. What if you could just use the wallet you have? So new pathways had to be built. And so there's a company called WalletConnect. It's, they've been around since 2018, and basically they have this, open standard and protocol for connecting wallets. It's called WalletConnect, and it's adopted across all sorts of different ecosystems. And what's important is that there's a shared standard, right? And what this was about was it was about bringing together wallet providers and getting them all together and coming to consensus on how you would send these messages back and forth, how you would deal with these transactions. Because that's all this is everyone's going to be using different tools, right? Everyone's going to be using different wallets. Everyone's going to be using different dApps. But if we agree on how information is sent back and forth, then it means that everything opens up. It means that any wallet can work with any dApp. And so if one application on Hedera chooses to integrate with a wallet, well, then that integration will work with any other wallet because it's on a shared standard. And that requires wallets coming to consensus and making that decision and agreeing with each other and performing a vote. And so that's what the news is that all of the wallets on Hedera have performed a vote and come to consensus and agreed on what those transactions are going to look like through WalletConnect. And so going forward, the goal is to go to one button, right? Just connect your wallet. Doesn't matter what wallet it is. And it doesn't matter what integration that dApp is using. You connect your wallet and you can perform those transactions you need to perform. And it's done in a secure way. And furthermore, it's a shared ecosystem integration and standard that's owned by the community, right? So it's an open source set of tooling that can be changed, modified in the future by the community collectively, with governance built in. So that's really the big news is those decisions have been made, the foundations have been put in place, and the group is basically assembling those developer resources. So any developer can integrate this new protocol, and all of those wallets can upgrade their existing protocols to be a shared standard, because the future that we want for the Hedera ecosystem is a future where any wallet works with any dApp, right? And when we think about a bull market, when we think about scaling, when we think about growth, that's really such an important thing to have, right? Everyone's speaking the same language. It's weird to have an ecosystem where, you can only use a particular wallet with a particular dApp. It just kind of limits what you can do. And it's a burden on dApps and wallets. So this is I think that this is a really big news story. I'm really excited about it. I was a part of it, but I think that really what the community should take away from it is, community initiatives are really important, right? What this is about is competing companies, right? Competing wallets coming together and working with each other and agreeing with each other and moving forward with a shared standard. That's pretty incredible. And I hope that those types of things happen in the future. I hope that people look at this project and kind of, copy paste it for other things that need to be done for the ecosystem. It creates a better way to compete. You want to be able to compete on features and exciting, fun things and building on top of things versus, what's possible and what's not possible. So I just wanted to say, like, looking on the, being on the inside of that, we've got an amazing wallet ecosystem, and just in general, an amazing startup ecosystem. These are people that have survived a bear market. These are people who have been in the ecosystem for a long time, true community members, and really making a lot of business concessions, right? Making a lot of sacrifice to put the community first. That's really what this boils down to, is working on a shared standards like this. Each of these wallets making big, big sacrifices to do that. So, I think that it's just worth mentioning that. Just wanted to highlight that. And yeah, WalletConnect, January is going to be, months of, these integrations going live, and there's going to be developer resources coming out soon and a lot of cool stuff I'll probably mention on the show again. But yeah, I think that's really what it's all about. It's been amazing working with wallets like that. And I kind of been behind the scenes a little bit. I've been a little busy. But I think that, that's that. I love it. It's like a little bit, it's a bit of an Avengers moment. It's like seeing the Avengers come together. Next story is concerning the Messari 2024 crypto thesis report. Now, many in the Hedera ecosystem are familiar with Messari and their reports. The HBAR Foundation has Messari doing different reports for things happening in the Hedera ecosystem. Messari is like a very well-known analyst, kind of like firm for crypto, and their reports are very kind of respected. And so this is their big 2024 crypto thesis. It's a PDF. It's only available to people that pay for their services right now, but it will be made public in January for free. So keep an eye out for that. And remember, this covers the whole crypto industry. And we don't know quite yet. Sorry, I dropped something. We don't know quite yet how much regarding Hedera the crypto report covers. But I got a couple things here to kind of take a sneak peek at before they publish this. So the Messari crypto thesis for 2024, as released by Ryan Selkis, the founder and CEO of Messari, touches on several critical predictions and insights for the crypto industry in the coming year. And so these are some of the key highlights for it. So crypto becoming political. The report stresses that the crypto industry will face significant political challenges in 2024. The influence of regulators, both in the US and globally, will be a determining factor in the industry's functionality and success. Number two, a focus on Bitcoin, stablecoins, and CBDCs. Worth noting, Hedera has the stablecoin studio that we've talked about quite a bit. That's huge. And there are very strong CBDC use cases being developed on Hedera, for example, MTech. So Bitcoin is expected to continue being a major player in the finance world. Despite the current disfavor of algorithmic stablecoins, their potential remains noteworthy. Retail-focused central bank digital currencies are also anticipated to gain attention, although their impact might be limited in the near term. Number three, centralized finance and crypto infrastructure. After a relatively quiet 2023, centralized finance services in the crypto space are expected to see more action, with many institutions showing renewed interest in entering the space. So I think what they mean by a relatively quiet 2023, I don't know if it was a quiet 2023 for centralized finance. I think it was probably a crazy 2023 because, I don't know, people going to prison, people going bankrupt, people going out of business. It's actually been quite the opposite, in my opinion, for centralized Web3 finance. It's been probably one of the craziest years ever. So that's my own opinion. Number four, layer one competition. The report mentions Ethereum's significant updates in its future vision, but also emphasizes the importance of compatibility and interoperability in a multi-blockchain world. Number 5, DeFi's growth potential. The move towards a more regulated, decentralized finance landscape is expected to mark the beginning of a long-term technological revolution or evolution, similar to the financial sector's adaptation to the internet. So, interesting point. Number 6, the ownership economy. Again, this is kind of right in line with what was in the at the HBAR Foundation's 2023 kind of like retrospective article. Despite mixed signals from the market prices and sentiment, consumer applications in crypto are booming, highlighting the importance of this sector. Number 7, advancements in peer-to-peer infrastructure. The report notes significant process in crypto wallets and decentralized autonomous organizations, right? DAOs. Governance, indicating a pivotal point in crypto adoption. So that's very interesting, right? Advancements in peer-to-peer infrastructure. So the Hedera governing council structure fits right into there. And they talk about DAOs. You could argue that Hedera is one of the first kind of high-profile DAOs in existence. So when you look at that 0.7, that's going to be very interesting. I think that, there's a strong chance Hedera will be talked about in that section of the report. Number 8, innovations despite bear markets. The report cites examples like their own products, Masari, and then different things like JP Morgan's Project Guardian, not to be confused with Project Guardian on Hedera, demonstrating that downturns in the market can still yield productive innovations. This is a point that, Hedera talks about quite a bit. They say, the bear market's tough, startups are struggling and there's a slowdown in NFTs and DeFi and this and that and investments and blah, blah, blah. But, there is that strong narrative, the fact that enterprise generally isn't that affected by downturns specific to the Web3 space. And there's been a ton of innovation that we've seen, as I talked about, in the Hedera ecosystem. So, that's something that I think could kind of catch people off guard, right? I think in general, with the last bull run, you go into the bull run and you're like, okay, it's starting back up again. We're at ground zero. We're at the very bottom. We're going to work our way up. And this bull run is going to be very interesting because I don't think that's the case. I don't think this bull market, for sure, this bull market's going to start at the bottom in regards to, amount of money in the space and stuff like that. But to be frank, I mean, it's pretty far along in regards to just enterprise adoption and stuff like that. Like the engines are firing on all cylinders in that regard. So it's going to be a very interesting bull market. Kind of seeing maybe people come in with the expectation of we're right at the beginning, nothing's happening, and I'm going to get right in at the ground floor. When in reality, it's like, it could be a very different story. It could unfold in a new way, which is very, very interesting. Yeah. And so we're getting to the end here, folks. We're getting to the end. I just got to the end of my Diet Coke. Looking ahead, I want to take a minute to look ahead into the next year. Again, this is the last show of the year. Taking a break. The next show would have been scheduled for the 27th, but obviously that's the holidays. I'm taking a break. And I got a lot of work to do on the show. Like, this is a format of the show that, I've been doing for a long time. I want to reshape the show a lot. I've got a lot of feedback about the show. And also too, the amount of news in the Hedera ecosystem has just grown so much. And the show's grown a lot. The show has a lot of resources now and a lot of like new equipment and different things like that. So I'm going to be changing the show, right? I'm going to be continually changing the format of the show to fit what people are looking for and what's most entertaining and useful and those different types of things. I don't want to get stagnant. And I mean, like I said, if you go back and listen to early episodes, like if you go back and listen to episode, 80, or you go back and listen to episode 60 or 40 or 20, it's like you can kind of see how I continually change the format of the show. So this is, the end of an era for the show. And it served it well. And I think that in the new year, it's just going to get a whole lot better with a whole lot of new stuff. One big thing that people want more of that I've been starting to do and seeing a lot of success with is, short form content, clips from the show. Also, potentially video content. But one thing remains true, one thing that makes this show so special is just the live nature of it, right? I love doing a live show. I think that when you do a pre-recorded show, it kind of changes how you do things. It doesn't really force you to kind of really analyze stuff, the way that you present information. I like to be on my toes. And it's kind of exciting too when you listen to a show like this and you kind of know that something could go wrong any minute. It's kind of exciting. And there's new stuff coming for me next year. I've got a lot of fun things I want to announce and stuff I want to dive into and all that kind of stuff. And clearly, there's a lot of new stuff coming from Hedera. But just a huge thanks, from me to everybody who listens to the show. It's grown a lot, as I said, and the people that I work with in the ecosystem, the people who listen to the show and all that kind of stuff, just really grateful for all the support. And I think that, 2024 is going to be a blast. One thing, just when we're looking ahead, is there was a segment this week from the HBAR Bulls show, another show you should watch, great one, on Friday. It's the segment called Shark Bites. It's with Rob Allen, who is a governing council member at Australian Payments Plus. And he shared some wacky numbers that I wanted to share with you just when it comes to the carbon offset side of things. And so I'll just quickly share. I guess I can just kind of play the clip for you here. I think that'd be most useful. Let's listen to this. This is Rob Allen on the HBAR Bulls show on Shark Bites.
For IREX in 2030 is said to be $70 billion, right? So $70 billion. It's about $19 billion now, up to $70 billion by 2030. So $70 billion market means an IREC, it represents a certificate for 1 megawatt hour having been produced. And that certificate on the markets at the moment goes for between 30 and 70 cents, US cents. So quick calculation, $70 billion in 2030 at 70 cents. Let's assume it doesn't change, but it's a quality token on Guardian. That's 100 billion tokens, right? So the target addressable market for this one use case in 2030 is 100 billion tokens. Now, if we assume that we get revenue, transactional revenue on the Hedera network of 1 cent, and we talked about this the other day for Guardian tokens, it could be 5 cents. It depends on the number of transactions. But and I don't know anything about the policy that relates to this token. But let's assume that it's a whole bunch of Hedera consensus service transactions and a token minting, followed by a couple of token transactions. So let's say it's 1 cent full life cycle per token. So 100 billion times 1 cent. It's 100 billion, 1 cent, that's 1 billion. For one use case, target addressable market on the Hedera network, $1 billion per year. And at, I don't know how many seconds a year, about 31 million seconds in a year, that equates to about 160,000 transactions a second. Right.
So that's kind of wild. I was watching that full episode and yeah, it's like the math is, it's pretty wild. And you think about that and, let's put that into perspective, right? Rob Allen is someone who sits on the governing council, right? And he's on a YouTube show and he's talking about how, hey, this EDF use case could be 160,000 transactions per second. And furthermore, it's not a situation where the governing council says, Jesus, Rob, you can't go saying stuff like that. That's nuts. They seem to be cool with that. So what does that mean, right? There's a lot to read into there. And I think that, we often in the community kind of understand that, like Hedera is going to see, hundreds of thousands of transactions per second, in the years or decades to come or whatever. But in 2023, having a governing council member kind of like say that and that to be okay, to me, it kind of feeds into what I talked about at the beginning of the show and kind of throughout the show is like, something's changed in a really fun way. I don't know how else to put it. Like Mance is tweeting all sorts of things and we got governing council members talking about this. And it's just, I'm just noticing an air of confidence. I noticed this too a little bit, like when I was in LA and I met with, Mance and Lehman and stuff and was just chatting with them. And it's like, you get that sense a little bit. There's just kind of something going on there that you can't quite put your finger on. And I was having a conversation recently, I was on a call with someone in the ecosystem working on something. And they kind of shared this sentiment of like, it's so weird because things, and again, this conversation was about a couple weeks ago, but it's like, it's weird because things can feel so desperate and so down and out in this kind of like bear market. But you have all these kinds of bold, confident statements coming from these key players in the Hedera ecosystem. And I think the problem is that we just don't have access to the information that they have access to. And it appears as though the information that they have access to is making them feel very confident about these things, right? Confident enough to be saying those types of things and making those types of posts that we talked about. So it's just a very interesting time. And I've just made the observation that over the last week, the approach has changed and I think people are very excited about it. One last thing is there's been a breadcrumb that just kind of popped up on my radar almost just during the show, which was the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation, the DTCC that we were talking about earlier, that acquired, they've acquired Securrency, which was that is a use case on Hedera that is doing an energy market. So there's a great tweet from @parabolic HBAR in the ecosystem, also known as SIVO. He says, looking forward to seeing this partnership with Hedera unfold. Recently, the DTCC, which settles 2.5 quadrillion worth of securities, acquired Securrency, now under the DTCC Digital Assets, which just revealed a joint venture with Hedera. So Securrency is a digital assets company. So it's basically like the digital version of DTCC. And that partnership with the Virtual Power Exchange is creating a kind of like, a first of its kind digital energy exchange platform. So it's very interesting to kind of see that kind of what's going on there. It's not really clear kind of what that's going to equal out to, but worth noting. Let's wrap things up. Let's get going. This is we're gonna land it here. $2024. It's coming up. I think that, my final thoughts on this year and kind of wrapping up the show here is like, I think as a Hashgraph enthusiast, it no longer feels like we're working to try and like will something into existence, right? You think back to January this year when the network is at 9 TPS and we had, not really any DeFi or anything like that. It felt like we were trying to like will something into existence. But now it feels like we're working on something that exists, right? It's true. And it's very interesting. And I think that it's going to cause a big shift going into the next year. And it feels like we're on really solid footing for the first time, and we should take advantage of it. Like I said, with bold moves, with hype, it appears as though other networks are not on very solid footing after making bold moves. So for better or for worse, the strategy that Hedera has taken over this last year or so through this bear market has been successful, made it to the other side. And I think it's kind of just worth kind of taking stock in. And I think, looking forward into the new year, we're really going to have to kind of let a lot of stuff go, kind of rethink things, get rid of some old patterns. It's just going to be a different thing. And really, when it comes down to it, I'm always kind of keeping in mind that the last bull run that Hedera had, we just really didn't have anything, right? And a lot of people will say we still don't have everything we need, but we have way more than we had before. So I don't know. I think that it's really hard to summarize your thoughts going into the new year. Yeah, I think that that's really just what it's about for me. It's about just kind of letting stuff go, out with the old and with the new kind of thing. We don't know what new is going to look like. As we've learned, looking at the retrospectives from the HBAR Foundation and different stuff like that, the key takeaways were kind of like, wasn't what we expected. I don't think next year is going to be what we expect either. I really don't. But one thing that we do know is that this network is seeing a ton of growth, and it is in beast mode. And so the week continues. A huge shout out to everyone listening live on X Spaces right now. I know this was a long one, but it's my last one for the year. So I had a lot to talk about. And another shout out to everyone listening to the recording on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and YouTube. And an extra shout out to all the supporters of the show. The contributions mean so much. That's a wrap for the Hashgraph Enthusiasts News, episode 106. All roads lead to Hedera. Broadcast live on Spaces every Wednesday. Not next week, but continuing in the new year. Every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, and made available on all major podcast platforms the following day. So you'll catch this tomorrow. If you'd like to become a supporter of the show, you can send an HBAR contribution to enthusiast.hbar using your Hedera wallet. The show's full Hedera address is in the podcast show notes, YouTube description, all that stuff, blah, blah, blah. Get all the info you need about the show at itsbrandond.com/HBAR. And again, another huge shout out. HBAR Bearing of the Year. Been able to do a lot of great work in the ecosystem. Just super grateful to the community. Appreciate it. And I'm excited for next year. And I'll see you on the first Wednesday of the new year for the news. I think it'll be a good year. And I'm digging this new theme music, by the way. I'm liking it. It feels good. And I think that, I want to do some video stuff. I want to do some more short form stuff. I think things are changing. It's just a lot of change. And who knows what it's going to look like. I think it'll be 10 times sooner, 10 times dumber, and 10 times bigger than we think. Take care, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Hashgraph Enthusiasts Show, hosted by Brandon Davenport.
Listen to past episodes and support the show at itsbrandond.com/HBAR.
Oh yeah, and happy holidays to everybody. Hope everyone has some time to kind of take a breather, take a break.